And wait a minute, and I'll verify it on the other YouTube screen. I don't know if you have a cool process for this, because
No,
I know you do streams all the time.
I do the exact same thing. I hit live, and then I just like go over to my YouTube. It's like, okay.
I'm like, I don't trust it, like even though I've done it plenty of times, I still want to make sure that we're going live.
Yeah.
And it looks like we're up, so awesome. I'll do a quick intro. Also, if anyone is already watching in the chat, feel free to say hello. I always like encouraging people to talk in the chat. Even if we're not responding right away as we continue to talk, it's always cool to kind of stay connected and hear what other people are working on.
Yeah, you've got at least a few people watching, it looks like.
Awesome.
So that's exciting.
Cool. So this is the Robust and Responsible AI community, kind of like a podcast event where we have a guest on. We're going to talk about a specific subject. And if it's your first time at a Robust and Responsible AI event, we're a community of AI machine learning practitioners, researchers, designers, and much more. This is our second event of 2022. We were on a bit of a hiatus, like a lot of meetups, and I'm excited to be back. You can stay connected with us in the Slack channel. There's a link in the description. It's one of the best places if you want to kind of introduce yourself, or also if you want to come in as a guest, feel free to find me on there or LinkedIn. And let me know if you'd want to come on and do either a talk like in this format or a different format. And today we have our guest, Benjamin. Would you like to introduce yourself and give us a little bit of your background? Yeah. Or also known as Seattle Data Guy, as your name says right now.
Yeah, no, thanks for the quick intro. But yeah, for everyone who doesn't know me, basically, I go as the Seattle Data Guy on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, pretty much everywhere else. Currently, I focus mostly on doing end-to-end data consulting, so helping companies kind of take data from raw sources to some sort of output, whether that's maybe more ML focused, more dashboarding, analytics focused, just building the solutions that get them there, or kind of just looking over what they've already built and auditing systems or helping their teams kind of set up better processes. So that's the general work I do now. But prior to that, I was working as a data engineer at Facebook, and then prior to that, a data engineer at a healthcare startup. And so basically my whole kind of experience in the industry has been around data, mostly around the data engineering aspect, but definitely playing in the data science space occasionally. Also, again, I love just making YouTube videos about kind of data engineering, kind of the space, just because I think it's personally a very exciting space. I feel like I've been doing it for the last couple of years, but I think maybe 2021 and 2022 have been the years where you've seen more people talking about it. You've got people like Zach Wilson, who's just blowing up on LinkedIn, and other people who are just kind of continually putting out content, and it's really exciting. Like I just put out a post about data engineering and like different content people you could follow, and it's like I realized that between the time I posted the first version of it and then next, it's like there's at least almost half a dozen more people I could add, and I think it's just kind of continually growing. So that's a little bit about me.
Yeah, the data engineering space, I share the same sentiment of like just seeing it really grow or being talked about so much more in the past few years, because it used to be like data science all the time. And now it's kind of like, all right, we kind of understand the data science field a little bit more, and there's a lot of content out there around it. But now we need to talk about data engineering, because that's like a lot of the problems we're facing in the field.
Yeah.
Awesome. And definitely check out Seattle Data Guy YouTube channel. There's a lot of really good content on there. And I think the links to that is in the description, as well as I think you have a Discord server if people want to stay connected with you and be a little bit more part of the Seattle Data Guy community. So today's topic that we have in our event description, we're going to talk about the modern data stack for machine learning pipelines, or just kind of the modern data stack in general. For those who don't know, could you maybe give a high-level description of what a data stack is, and or the modern data stack?
Yeah, and I think it was on I don't remember who responded to this earlier this week, but I was on a show with Ravit, and I like the answer that someone gave, which was a lot of what we call the modern data stack or data stack is often just a amalgamation of a taken apart version of other tools that have existed for a long time, right? Like for anyone who's worked in enterprise, there were a lot of solutions you could work with, whether it was Oracle, SAP, that had a lot of these different components. most likely all in one, or you could buy it kind of module by module. And so a lot of what makes up kind of the current thing, like when people say like modern data stack, are often like broken down pieces of that, and then they're kind of re-pieced together. That way you don't feel as like tied into like say vendor lock-in or something. So you can kind of pick solutions that you like, that better maybe suits your needs. So they're just often different components that answer different pain points throughout the data process. Through trying to get data from raw sources, you need something to ingest. Somehow you need to store all that raw data. You've got some sort of storage layer. Somehow you need to then maybe add some business logic on there. You add that, and then from there some visualization. And they're just different components along the way. I know there's a lot of people who don't like the term like stack, or because they're like, well, it's not really a stack. But I think the point is that it's just different solutions trying to answer different pain points, like a front end, or like if you're doing some sort of stack where it's like a web developer doing like full stack kind of development. You're often picking your database back end and front end, and here we're picking ingestion, storage, reporting, and then when you talk about like ML, it's like all the other components that involve after that, which is things like logging and feature engineering or things like that. So it's just each of those steps and trying to pick the right tool for them.
Right. It definitely makes sense. I like the comparison of, as someone who's been a web developer in the past, it's your stack of software or stack of pieces that you're putting together for an end-to-end type of solution. Just like you were saying, you would choose a database, you would choose a framework. Sometimes that's out of needs because something does something better, or sometimes it's maybe out of preference because you like programming in Python, in terms of web development anyway, programming in Python versus JavaScript.
Yeah.
And so, like, data stack, people have been using data science and all these things for quite some time. How have you seen the modern data stack kind of change over time?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the modern days, like it's both a relatively new term, and as Joe Rice likes to point out, it's like also a relatively old term now. So it's like the term modern is he feels like is moot, but
Right.
so in some ways, like I feel like we're still like figuring it out, and I feel like also the term modern data stack really finds itself more at home in like SMB and mid market kind of spaces, because it's like that's a lot of it's based on often consumption based pricing, or something that's not as tied to like a single license. So that's why I think one of the reasons modern data stack has really found a foothold in companies that maybe don't have massive budgets to sign $1 million contract for some of these tools that wouldn't even talk to you unless you are willing to sign $1 million contract. So often tools like, for example, Snowflake, it's just a little more approachable because the cost is a little bit lower, and it's easier to use than some of the other solutions that were maybe cloud as well. So I mean, if you want to like start the modern day stack back at like Redshift, like even though it's not, but like if you want to start as far as back there, I think the big change that's happened since then is Snowflake just made things easier, and that's really why I think, again, that kind of built the foundation for all these other tools, where it's like, okay, now that we've made storage easier, how do we make ingestion easier? Now that we've made ingestion easier, how do we make data visualization on the cloud? And so it's a lot of this focus on trying to eliminate redundant work, as well as like trying to make everything cloud first. So I think those are kind of the real key focuses. It's like, how do we like try to remove a lot of this work that's repetitive? If you've worked as a data engineer, you've probably written a Salesforce connector or something similar 3 to 4 times, depending on the company you've worked at. You've had to rewrite it because of migrations or changes in the in Salesforce or Workday or something underneath it all. And so I think it's trying to remove that work that becomes very repetitive. So that's part of it. The other part's like being very cloud first, and then finally trying to make it really just easy to use, to where you can focus more on the system design and the actual value things drive versus these problems that should be solvable not pretty easily, but at scale pretty easily, like if you've got one company doing it. So I think that's
Yeah.
kind of the things that like market.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I might be a little biased because of the field that I'm in. And one thing I feel like I keep seeing come in a little bit more is like, I don't know if it's a blanket term of like observability, but a little bit more of like data checking and model monitoring, which is, at least from my experience, like that's a little bit of a newer component. And that's probably not true for like healthcare or something. I know, different fields have had different things in place for a different amount of time.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I think the interesting thing, like, and the earlier chat I had this week, I think was like around reliability, observability, and that's always like that's the kind of piece that just doesn't come in. Like you can try to bring it in, and there's ways you try to sell it prior to things happening, but it generally doesn't come in until like something happens, right? It's like, okay, something's happened, um, and now we need this solution in play, and so it's usually kind of like post. The other thing is, especially like ML, then you need like ML. I think it's a massive problem, right? Because like as a data engineer, we're maybe only used to thinking about things from like an analytics side, which, if something changes in the data, there might not be a massive change or impact downstream. Whereas, something like an ML model could be massively impacted by, even something that's a slight change because they were expecting some, data to be used to create the model, and now it's something completely different. So that can have a larger or more lasting impact that impacts greatly how the whole thing operates, right? How the whole system even operates.
Yeah, it's interesting. I used to work in hardware reliability, and it it's just very similar. Like if you're doing a more consumer product, people wouldn't have these like reliability processes in place until something would happen sometimes, and they're like, oh, okay, now we have to add this step to make sure that this doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
But then again, if you were building an airplane or something, they like pushed the field of reliability for hardware. But it's just like an interesting comparison that I've noticed coming from that field over to here, and it's like seeing the same thing kind of happen now with data, which is fun.
Yeah.
What are some of the like common mistakes that you see people make when they're putting together their pipeline? Maybe something that like people should think about when they're building it versus later.
Yeah. I think it's like, when I think about, again, when I first entered kind of data and tried to be more in the data science space, a lot of the problems I would run into were, okay, I've developed this model. Now what? Right? Like that was always my first problem, right? It's like, okay, I've developed this model, but what do I do with it? Right? Like how do you deploy it? How do you actually utilize it? And I think we've definitely gotten into a place where there's at least a little more know-how in terms of like, this is how you generally deploy models. You're going to use serverless, you're going to use Docker container, you're going to use Kubernetes, something. And then you utilize it from there. So I think that's a little more known. I think often the gap is kind of what I referenced earlier, and it's not even me trying to obviously talk more about what you guys do, but I think that's, as a data engineer, that's kind of what I think about, just because I've talked to companies that are like data catalog companies, and that's one of the things that do like data lineage, and that's one of the things that they're also trying to capture, which is like which ones of these workflows are connected to ML, because their end users are like, we want to know which ones of these are attached to an ML model, because those are the pipelines we have to care about when we're doing some sort of change overall, because as soon as we change something, it could have some sort of impact on this ML model. If we don't know, then we don't know, and then something happens, and then now we've got unexpected results coming through, and that might not be what they want. So I do think that that's kind of the next step, is like making sure as things change in underlying data, like that's trackable, traceable, because that's going to be that next impact. It's like, okay, now that especially since things are operationalized, like once you try to like give something control, right, like, and automate it, which is the value I think in both ML and in data. It's like automating some processes that now you don't have to do as much. You don't want that to be like unknown. Like you still want to know that the results are what you're expecting, right? Like especially if it's like automated ad spend or something of that nature, you want to make sure that how it's spending is still how you're expecting it to spend, or what makes sense, that you don't have some adverse reactions occurring. So I think that's generally the space I'm hearing a lot of people like talk about when they're doing ML work. It's like, okay, well, we need to be able to know when things are changing, because if we don't know, we could have completely unexpected results, and we just need to be able to at least track what those results are. If they're still what we're expecting, that's fine. But if they're completely out of range, we need to at least rework it or rethink it, or make sure it's still doing something that we consider good. So yeah.
Right, or making sure that someone, like I've had instances with computer vision data where someone in a factory turns off a light that wasn't supposed to be off, and so now all the images coming in are dark, and that's something that's no one even made an update to the pipeline or anything like that. That was just someone made a slight mistake in a physical environment, and there wasn't a way to catch it, which is interesting, and until you manually go look at it or wonder why your model predictions are off.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just those things where you can't even like, you can't predict how these things are going to, the same way like data engineers don't always know what's going to change upstream from like a data type because software engineers, the software engineering team is moving fast. Or they're just doing things. They change something, it breaks your pipeline, and now you've got to kind of go back and fix it because especially if it's like super tightly coupled. It's probably even worse on ML, right? Because it's even more broad. Like it's not just a data type that's going to break the pipeline. It's just some abnormal behavior that you're not going to see, right? Like at least with the data type, you see that behavior, right? Like it breaks. And I think with ML, it's like it might not even break things. It might just continue to function, but function abnormally. And if you don't know it's functioning abnormally, and if you've got 100 pipelines you're trying to monitor or manage, you're not going to see it until it's a problem, basically. And that's, you want to see it before it's a problem, before management's like, why are we either spending too much or why are we not sending out, letter emails or whatever for our marketing campaigns as expected, or why is whatever was happening on the factory floor not occurring because your pipeline is dark. So all these little things. It's always about trying to avoid management being the one to notice, right? Like you
Right.
want to be the one that's like preemptively saying like, hey, this is currently broken. These are the reasons. We're fixing it. It should be fixed in the next, whatever hour, day, whatever it's going to take. It's generally a better process than, director or CMO or CFO being like, hey, I noticed this. That's not a conversation we like having.
It's a good way of just making your pipeline or end results, whatever you're looking at, more trustworthy.
Yeah.
Because like if you don't have something like that in place, and then you look at the results and you present it to someone and then they're like, this just doesn't seem right, and then you have to go dig back and you found out that a month ago something changed and that's why it's not right. I don't know, it's just not having something like that in place kind of scares me sometimes, I guess.
Yeah.
Does anyone watching have any interesting maybe failures that you've experienced in the field with something like this? Like how I mentioned, seeing something with computer vision. Does anyone have anything like that? Let us know in the live chat because it's always fun kind of seeing what other people have experienced. Well, people are writing that out. What are the things happening right now, or maybe it's been happening for a while, but a technology kind of in the field of probably data engineering, but it could just be data science in general that you find really exciting?
I mean, I think for me, what's going to be, I think, more exciting here coming up is like, I'm just hoping we start answering more of the process and value aspect of data sooner. I think we're, in a lot of stages, we're still in an infrastructure state where people are like, okay, what infrastructure is right? Right. Like there's a ton of tools for everything, right? Like you've seen probably Matt Turk's diagram of like everything that ever exists.
The
And it's
one
like,
that is it expands like a giant monitor, and you'd have to really zoom in to find all the different technologies.
yeah, exactly. So I think from like an infrastructure standpoint, like we have all the pieces, right? like that's arguably like if you need something, it exists. And I think the harder thing now is trying to focus on what processes do we need to use at different levels of companies, because putting in a full data governance team on a SMB that does 10 million to 100 million in a year might not make sense. But there are processes that still need to be put into place to make sure that the pipelines you're building, all the stuff you're putting into play, are maintainable, reliable, things of that nature. So there's that aspect. So I think there's like some process at each step. Okay, mid market, what are the steps that we take now to make sure that we're growing appropriately with our data. And yeah, I just think every step along that way. And then on the other side is like really the discussion of value, and it's like, what does that actually mean? There's a lot of companies I think right now that are trying to figure out how do we actually add value. And I think I've had a lot of people answer, like one, sure, there's like the obvious like dashboards, but like I think for a lot more people when I've talked about it, it's like we think the value is added in when you don't even notice that data is like behind the scenes doing something, like whether it's you reintegrate data back into Salesforce or something similar to that, where it's like it just becomes part of your process. And I think that's where I'm excited. It's like I really want to see, and like almost every time I have someone who jumps on my podcast, or I don't even know call it podcast, just my live, I always ask that question. It's like, how have you seen data drive value? Because that's what I want to know. I care less about like, optimizing a pipeline and making it 20% faster, unless that's a real problem for a company. For me, it's more like, okay, now that we can pretty much process data pretty quickly, if we can't, you can just throw more compute at it. you know, so if we can do that decently well, what do we do with it now? Like, what now that we have all this, like, what are people actually doing that makes some sort of impact for a company? I think that's where I'm more intrigued and excited about things, because I think people are trying to answer that more and trying to force that discussion more than trying to force the discussion. Okay, what's the next tool that I need to implement?
Yeah, that's I definitely kind of feel the same way. I'm much more excited about end results of data or machine learning doing something amazing and really cool versus the I mean, it's fun to like nerd out about the tools as well, but yeah, the thing that's really exciting is like how is this making an impact or sometimes even changing like an entire industry or field, which is cool.
Yeah.
There's a question that Danny asked. You probably already see it, and I know it's not a secret because it's on your LinkedIn and stuff. But he asked, when will Ben become the Denver data guy?
I don't think I ever really will. I think for me, Seattle's home. So, and that's what I've been writing and making videos for the longest time under. So, that was a maybe a poor choice, maybe not a poor choice of like naming convention when I was very, like I think like 22, 23. And I just was like, I'm in Seattle, I do data, and I'm, a guy. Let's put that under. So it's just very like haphazard. Like it's not even great. Like, I think you asked earlier, am I expanding my team? And I am. And so it's not even great under that context, because then it's like, if everyone looks, they're like, Seattle, so you're singular, right? It's like, this was not thought out. All right. I didn't think that deep back then. I was just like, I'll just be doing some side consulting occasionally. So
I like the brand. I don't think you need
yes,
to change it.
I do as well. I think the worst comes to worst, I might like have another company that's just more broadly named at some point, and then it'll still be the Seattle data guy online as my persona. So yeah.
Speaking of which, do you want to kind of talk a little bit more about what you're currently working on, whether that's Seattle Data Guy, like the content, the stuff you have that's coming up, or the other work that you're doing, kind of with I think like consulting.
Yeah. Also, Danny's comments, I'm pretty sure it's 2/3 correct, but
I'll bring it up on the screen just so people can see. Ben is correcting Danny here.
but what was I just thinking? Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of like content, I'd like to do some stuff. I think around mm, one around like maybe more like intro style content for specific tools like Databricks, like Snowflake. I need to balance out Databricks, because otherwise, if I don't bring in Databricks, everyone's gonna think the only thing I talk about is Snowflake, which I was told at like a dinner with a bunch of VCs. They're like, they pay you? I'm like, no, I like their tool, so I need to balance it out with Databricks, and probably some other tools in there, like just some other processing engines as well, whether it's like Dremio or Starburst, just to make sure everyone understands. Like, yes, I also know and use some of these tools as well. So there's that kind of content that I would like to put out. Um, I do want to keep occasionally putting out like more high level content for maybe more consulting things, but I definitely enjoy making some of the intro content. It was a lot of fun. I really want to like improve my newsletter. It's so hard to read and like the Pragmatic Engineer and not feel challenged every time you read it to write a better newsletter, because it's just like, I don't know, have you read any of that by chance?
I don't think I've read the Pragmatic
Yeah,
newsletter.
I want to say it's the most subscribed to technical Substack. It's
I'm gonna
just
have to go
great.
check it out now.
Yeah, it's just, the author's great. I think they just did a deep analysis of like Facebook's engineering like processes, and it was just like one, I worked there, so I was like, oh wow, this is really accurate. And it's just interesting as they compared it through, because they've worked at a few other companies like Uber, and just kind of like comparing it to that. They've got great diagrams, they've got a great writing style that's very like, broken up. It's not just like wall of text, it's like very interactive as you're reading, in a way like you're not just stuck, trying to digest big pieces of information. They have a great way of making it just super succinct. um so yeah, like from a newsletter standpoint, I'm like trying to figure out like how do I like it's so weird you can see something and still not understand how to do it. Like you're like, I see what they're doing, but like I almost need someone to yell at me, tell me what I'm doing wrong on my side to do it better. So there's that. And then just consulting and expanding out that, like I said, trying to grow a team, trying to become scalable in some way, as the data field kind of grows. So yeah.
That's awesome. And your newsletter is the Substack or on Substack, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Also under Sal Data Guy. So I try to brand as much as I can under there. So
Awesome. Yeah, I think if you just anyone searches Seattle Data Guy, most of your content's gonna come up.
yeah.
Um, for consulting side, is there anything specific that like if someone wanted to hire you as a consultant, is there anything you want to shout out there? Like if people wanted to figure or contact you about that?
Yeah, I mean, so my focus is around a lot of again end-to-end data solutions. So sometimes that means like I'm coming in and doing like hands-on work. It's definitely a good portion of my time. Actually doing hands-on work, implementing solutions, and then there's also a good portion of it that's very high level and like me maybe auditing your data stack, or maybe you need to replace a component or multiple components, and I kind of can come in and provide insights or look through what your current workflows are and how you could replace all of those. So there's also that aspect as well. And so yeah, so those tend to be the two big aspects I think that I focus on. Is a lot on either doing hands-on implementation or kind of coming in and helping you understand kind of what solutions and what components can kind of replace maybe what you're currently using, maybe how you should audit it. I've done a lot of like reverse engineering situations where it's like maybe there's a team of 3 or 4 people who built this data stack. They're gone, they left, and now this company has been kind of like hobbling along for a year, and I've kind of come in and like tried to reverse engineer all the logic and everything. And in some cases, they're not even sure like how to make apples to apples of everything. So working with maybe their sources as well and talking to them and being like, okay, how is this logically supposed to go together? Because you've got a very unique system, no one's using it, or no one else uses it. There's no documentation online. How do I like calculate even like total revenue from your data? Because you've got so many different like things I have to like take out, put in, things like that. So yeah, that's also an aspect as well.
Awesome. I have a quick question. When is your next live stream going to be?
Today actually in this case, I just realized I was like, oh, we're gonna do two of these today. Yeah, I'm gonna do one today. I was gonna do it Monday, but then Preet and I was hanging out with Preet and Carly. I don't know if you know both of them as well.
I know her a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, so I was hanging out with them earlier or on Monday, and I realized like, oh, I'm not gonna be able to do live on Monday. So
You're gonna
I
hang
try
out
to do
with
them.
real people instead in person versus
Yeah,
online. What a
I should
time!
I should have been streaming the the dinner live. Just like, all right, we're gonna do a live dinner here. I'm sure the restaurant would have really appreciated that.
I'm almost surprised that like all of you weren't doing that.
We are all some form of like content creator, so
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. There
it's
would have
hard
been like
it's hard to imagine.
because I know Harpreet has like the data science happy hour, I think. So that
Yes.
in that case, it would have been an in-person version.
Yes. And yeah, we just did something similar with like I was talking about like Tina Huang, Kenji, Luke Bros, and a couple of them as well. So uh, yeah, it's fun to do. Like it is fun to start doing these in person things because a lot of these people I've met over the last 2 years, right, online since we've all been stuck
Mhm.
online, and so I've been meeting a ton of people that have all been like online relationships for the last like 2 months, and like I'll be going to like the Snowflake Summit, and that will hopefully also be meeting a bunch of people that I've met online as well. Also, yeah, we'll see how fun that is. I imagine Vegas will be very hot. That's my only concern. I'm like, oh, it's gonna be so hot, isn't it, in June?
That's how I feel anytime I leave Seattle now.
Yeah,
I saw a question come in. I know we have just about a minute or so. I don't know if you have a hard stop right
not
at
super hard, no.
10:30, but someone had a question about if they're. Oh wait, sorry, I lost it because now there's too many questions. Someone asked, "Do you have any workshops to help those embarking on taking a company into the modern data stack?"
I have been putting one together because to me, I think that's another gap, right? Like it's just the training, the talking. So I am putting one together, if someone's interested, but that will be more for companies. So like I try to avoid most like one-on-one conversations. I try like for me, my goal is always to scale. So it's like how do I talk to 20 people, not how do I talk to one, but um but also, happy to talk and give some insights there as well.
Cool. I'm really excited. And yeah, even if it's not necessarily workshop style content, check out the Seattle Data Guy channel. It has a lot of really good information if you're looking to kind of learn more about different tools that go in that data stack. I think it's a good starting place. And then one other question someone was asking about, I think just if you have any favorite resources, I guess for you, I would say specifically in like data science or data engineering to get started besides your channel. And it's probably similar to the last question, but I don't know if you have another channel in mind or some book or an online course that you think is awesome for getting started.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to think to get started. There's definitely a ton of books, and now I'm like spacing on all of them.
No worries.
Um,
And it depends on everyone's background, so it's hard to give one answer because book like I don't know what their experiences and have they like how much programming have they done, have they built a machine learning model. There's a lot of different starting points, I think, depending on your experience, but there's a ton of resources out there.
There are in the like so for example, like I think I've put 2 posts out on LinkedIn recently where I've just been like shouting out like other creators. Like one was like a bunch of data engineering YouTubers, like Andre Kretz, like who's been doing a lot, I think, more on like the technical side, like Darshil, like e-learning. Trying to think who else was on that list. Kahan Data Solutions. There's I don't know actually how to say his name, but he does like you just look like Azure Data Factory, and you'll find his videos. He's got like 100,000 subscribers that all watch videos on Azure. I think it's really interesting because like I have something that like tracks that like tells you someone else's like view rates on certain days, and like you can literally see like weekends are like below average, and then weekdays are like consistently like above average. So I just thought that it was interesting from like an Azure. Like clearly people are focusing on this content during the week when they're working. Like I need to answer Azure questions, so that channel is really great for that. Again, Kahan Data Solutions has a lot of like intro content for like modern data stack kind of components. SSAS, that's not really modern data stack, but SSAS, DBT. I think he's got some Snowflake in there, some GitHub. There's also a bunch of writers that I posted recently on LinkedIn, like Sarah, and I'm trying to remember who else I had on that list. But they tend to range from some being more high level, which I think where I focus a lot of my energy now. It's like trying to figure out the high level stuff versus trying to always get into the weeds as much. But there's a ton of good creators. I'm just I'm never good on the spot.
No worries.
Never.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on. And I think we can kind of wrap up unless you have anything else you want to give a quick shout out. I definitely recommend following Seattle Data Guy on LinkedIn. Subscribe to his YouTube. All those links are in the description. And you create amazing content and keep it going. And again, thank you so much for coming on to the robust and responsible AI community.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. If you want to stay connected and ask any other questions later, make sure you can join our Slack channel or Ben's Discord channel if we didn't get to your question. So I'm going to go ahead and end the stream. And thank you again, Seattle Data Guy. And hopefully I'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah, for sure.